Now, Erwin Kotler is an internationally recognized human rights advocate and scholar who generally does not need an introduction, but we will provide one. He is an emeritus professor of law at McGill University, a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Professor Kotler served as a member of Parliament for Mount Royal from 1999 to 2015. As Minister of Justice, he helped make the Supreme Court of Canada the most gender representative Supreme Court in the world. He appointed the first ever Indigenous and visible minority justices to the Ontario Court of Appeal and led the adoption of the Civil Marriages Act, legalizing same-sex marriage across Canada. In 2020, Professor Kotler was named Canada's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. And since 2015, Professor Kotler is the founder and international chair of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And we are honored to have you with us, Professor Kotler, and it's my pleasure to have you introduce our speaker this evening. So please, go ahead.
Doree, thank you for those very kind words of introduction, honorable juge, honoré distingués étudiants et étudiantes, chers amis, bienvenue à tous. Je serais très heureux de participer dans cette grande soirée and delighted to be part of this annual Lord Reading Law Society student dinner with its distinguished representation from bench, bar, and academe. And on this occasion, to have the pleasure of introducing a former student, Jay Rosenzweig, now a valued colleague, friend, comrade in arms in the struggle for human rights, and where a singularly outstanding student, as Jay was, has now become a mentor, leader, and inspiration for so many. I still recall a research paper that Jay wrote for me at the time on bringing Nazi war criminals to justice, a paper that was distinguished for its historical understanding, its domestic and international perspective, its comparative inquiry, its quality of research and clarity of presentation. But what I remember most of all was his policy recommendations, his prescriptive agenda, a prescriptive agenda anchored in lessons learned and action to be taken, which has characterized his engagement since. Indeed, it is that multi-pronged engagement that has characterized Jay's leadership as the founding chair, I would say the creative partner of Rosenzweig and Company, a global private and public consulting firm, which recruits the best for the best, which has been investing and building innovative startups, and which has been underpinned by the promotion and protection of egalitarian relationships. Jay has been at the forefront of empowering women and minorities, not only to take their rightful place in the corporate bedrooms of the nation, but to take their rightful place in decision-making in our political cultures as a whole. What I want to say with regard to his work is that it has had an incredible, and I've been able to bear witness to it, an incredible transformative impact. As part of his egalitarian mission, Jay has published the annual Rosenzweig report since 2006. It not only tracks gender equality at the highest levels of corporate leadership, but also incentivizes ideals of equity, diversity, and inclusion, not simply as slogans, but as reflecting, as he has put it, strategic goals and indicators. His belief in the moral imperative of non-discrimination and the pursuit of equality. And so I was delighted, and with this, I moved to a close. I was delighted when Jay agreed to become the chair of the board of directors of the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, engaged in the combating of injustice as part of the larger pursuit of justice, whether that be combating the resurgent global authoritarianism, promoting and protecting a rules-based order, combating systemic racism, empowering women, or defending political prisoners. Somehow, through it all, Jay has also found time to become a songwriter, to prepare special songs for the members of his wonderful family, and to be able to regale his friends with that yet another talent. And I'm delighted, along with all those who are here this evening who count themselves as being amongst Jay's friends and beneficiaries, to introduce you now to our guest speaker, Jay Rosenzweig.
Thank you so much, Professor Kotler. It's beyond an honor because I continue to consider myself a student of yours, and I always will. And I learn lessons from you every single day up until this moment. And it's really beyond words how flattering your words were for me. And to have my most impactful and important professor speak these kind words to me means really the world to me. So thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here amongst many friends, and I'm flattered and honored to have this opportunity to speak with the Lord Reading Law Society, and I have so many friends who are past presidents and board members and are on the call today, such as Greg Azencott and Larry Markowitz and Al Mendelson. And these are friends who I've grown up with, and Aaron Lesser, and really all of you. It's just such a pleasure to be here amongst friends, and a new friend, Doree, who has organized this event, and just appreciation all around. I remember the day I met Professor Kotler really quite vividly. I had a moot court that I had to present. And as many of you know, as a young law student, that could be quite a nerve-wracking experience. And as I got up to make my presentation, who walked in to judge the moot court but the international human rights icon, Irwin Kotler, which only increased my anxiety levels. And I began my presentation, and I was watching Professor Kotler's reactions, and I saw that he was writing furiously on a piece of paper, and I was wondering, what is he thinking? What is he writing? And as I had concluded my presentation in his typical gentlemanly fashion, he thanked me for the presentation and commended me for what I had done right, and then proceeded to list 10 things that I could have done better, each point interrelated and building upon the next. And I was kind of in shock and awe, and I was fascinated by this individual. And I thought to myself, this is a person I can learn from, and not only about the law. So I had asked him if he might be so gracious as to spend time with me in his office so that I can learn more about how I could improve. And he graciously agreed to meet with me, and it was just a wonderful conversation and a friendship, a lifelong friendship ensued from there. And if you fast forward to today, as Professor Kotler mentioned, I'm now honored to be the chair of his Human Rights Board. But one of the, I guess, underlying themes of my career, and I'll talk a little bit about my career trajectory, as it's an area that I understand the students might be interested in learning more about. One of the underlying themes really of my life and career is having real humility and approaching the universe with a sense of curiosity really being a student for life, if you will, and having a real sense of joy in exploring the possibilities in our universe, and recognizing that, recognizing moments when the universe is really presenting us with opportunities and walking through those doors, and always seeking feedback and constructive criticism and really opportunities to self-improve on an ongoing basis. By way of background, I'm born and raised in Montreal. I grew up in Ville-Saint-Laurent, and I went through the Jewish parochial system, where I went to Talmud Torah and Herzliya, and after that went to Vanier, and ultimately landed at McGill, where I studied philosophy. And near the end of my philosophy degree, I decided that I'd apply to a number of law schools, and McGill Law School was actually my first choice. And very early on, I got into a number of law schools, but not McGill. I guess I was on a wait list for McGill. And that summer, I backpacked through Europe with a friend of mine, and my parents were eagerly at home awaiting mail from McGill Law School to see if I got in or not. And they happened to have gone on a vacation for a short period of time as well while I was away, and asked the neighbors to take in the mail. And long story short, our neighbor called up my parents and said, we picked up the mail, and Jay didn't get into McGill. And my parents relayed the message to me. And they ended up, we decided that I would go to University of Ottawa Law School. So my parents very kindly went to Ottawa, got me an apartment. I left Europe early. And when I arrived at home, I decided to call the dean of McGill Law School. And at the time, it was Rosenzweig Keynote. And I called her up and I said, it seems like I didn't get into your school, which is totally fine. But for my own self-edification, I wonder if I might meet you at your office so that you can go through my file to let me know where I fell short. And she graciously agreed to meet with me in her office. And I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but I'd just gotten back from backpacking. I had long hair, a messy beard. My jeans were cut off, and I had a white tank top on. And here I am walking into the dean of the law school's office. She opens up my file, and she says to me, "Who told you didn't get in?" I explained the story to her, and she said, "Well, I don't know what letter they read, but you didn't not get in. You're still on the wait list. And I'm not really supposed to interview potential students, but while I'm here, tell me about yourself." And we ended up having a wonderful conversation. And at the time we were applying, I was applying for the national program, where you could either start in the common law stream or the civil law stream. So she asked me, if you were to get in, which stream would you like? And I indicated the common law stream. Well, she said, well, if you do get in, I can't give you common law, but civil law is a potential. So I said, well, I'll take anything. Anyway, the next day, the phone rings. I pick up the phone and she's like, hello, it's Dean Juk here. I wanted to tell you that you're in, and I've given you the common law stream. So it's just another example of really the benefits of engaging with individuals and seeking feedback and the like. My doorbell keeps ringing. I'm gonna be right back, one back. I apologize. So upon graduation from law school, I decided to study criminal defense or go into criminal defense with a firm called Pinkowski Lockyer in Toronto. And they represented a number of wrongfully convicted prisoners, including the case of Guy Paul Morin and Mildred and a number of other a number of other prisoners who, in fact, when Professor Kotler was Minister of Justice and Attorney General, helped to free. Professor Kotler, as many of you might know, freed more wrongfully convicted prisoners in 1 year more than any of the previous ministers combined. And that was a great experience. And at the time, I was chosen from amongst the articling students to junior on a murder trial. It was myself and a 31-year-old lawyer who worked on that trial. And it was quite a daunting experience. I was in a cold sweat for about 6 weeks during that trial. And we ended up with a not guilty verdict, which was an incredibly extraordinary experience for me. But I decided at the time that I didn't want to necessarily practice law over the long term. And I saw a business opportunity, which was a very big pivot for me. As Professor Kotler had indicated, I got into the talent strategy business with a boutique firm that I helped grow to the point where the largest firm in the world in our sector bought us, which was a great experience for me, young guy. Suddenly, our firm was acquired, and I'm one of the youngest partners globally at the world's largest firm in our sector. And life was good there, leveraging off of the brand. I spent a number of years there, but I determined that there was a number of inefficiencies in the big firm, and I'm sort of an entrepreneur by nature. It's in my blood. It's kind of where I come from. So for those reasons, I decided to break away and start my own firm to bring more customized solutions to the table for my clients. And the vision's been realized. We've been very, very fortunate. We're doing work now all around the world for some of the world's biggest companies, helping them with talent strategy needs at the most senior levels, helping private equity firms to change out leadership to achieve their goals post-acquisition. And lastly, I've been spending a lot of time with founders over the last 5 or 10 years, helping them to scale up their businesses. And it's typically in the emerging growth, emerging tech space. And in that regard, I'm helping them not only with things like talent strategy and team building, which is of course very important, but also with things like fundraising and business development and overall strategic and operational advice. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm on the advisory board of dozens of emerging growth, emerging tech businesses across North America and around the world. And very often an important nexus for me in terms of deciding whether or not to be a part of these organizations is if they have a very specific impact, whether it be in the area of environmental or diversity or other areas that are purpose driven. And we've had a number of exits, a number of very good exits, and we're on the verge of a number of others. And of late, I've gotten deeply involved in the Web3 space, which I'd be happy to elaborate on in the Q&A if that's of interest to anybody. Really the next dimension of web and the NFT world and the metaverse, which is a very, very exciting space. I'm in about 15 or 20 projects right now in that regard. In addition to the Raoul Wallenberg Center, which is my most important philanthropic project, I'm on a number of other nonprofit boards, including Black North, which was established in the aftermath of the George Floyd tragedy. And the goal of Black North is to reverse systemic racism. We've gotten hundreds of companies to sign a pledge to do better in terms of Black executives amongst their leadership ranks. We've gotten big checks from mayors to invest in things like affordable housing. We've gotten significant checks from banks to invest in mentorship programs in the schools. And in my capacity as chair of the board of the Raoul Wallenberg Center and board member of Black North, I've tried to bring these organizations together, and I'll continue to do so in common cause. So as an example, we released a joint statement against all forms of racism and anti-Semitism I co-authored an op-ed with the founder of Black North on the perils of anti-Semitism. We issued a joint statement on the importance of police reform, and so on and so forth. And in addition to that, we developed a program with a number of other groups, including the Muslim community and the Asian community, all coming together in common cause against all forms of racism and discrimination. And it's not without its challenges, but it's something that I'm determined to continue working on, because I feel that intersectionality is extremely, extremely important. I'm on another board called Pandemic of Love, run by a great friend of mine named Shelley Tagilsky, where she developed at the beginning of the pandemic a Google spreadsheet, basically with 2 columns, one for donors who could still afford to help, and a second column for donees who came onto hard times because of the pandemic. And she's raised to date through this marketplace that she created over $60 million for those in need during the time of the pandemic. And she was awarded CNN Hero this past year. She writes a column in Time magazine about the beautiful relationships and learnings between donors and donees. And I think it's very, very interesting and important work. I'm on another board called When We Band Together, helping refugees, particularly right now in Lesbos, Greece, by building shelters for them, educational shelters and sports and wellness shelters and things of that nature. I'm on a number of other organizational boards, including CJPAC and Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University and Migdal Or. So a number of important causes, and obviously the nonprofit side is really important to me. I'm involved in music, as Professor Kotler alluded to. I enjoy writing music myself. I'm the founding investor in a really beautiful place on the west side of Los Angeles called Winston House, which is a beautiful community of musicians and artists, some very well known, others up and coming. It began at my friend's loft in Venice Beach, where only 100 people could be held, and we'd have these Thursday night events with people ranging from Justin Bieber performing and Ed Sheeran and Billie Eilish before anyone knew who she was. And we try to do good through the Winston House, including after the the tragic Parkland shooting. We developed a program called Spark the March, where we galvanized the youth to march against gun violence in the aftermath of that tragedy. And Corey McGuire, the founder of Winston House, tells me that we've probably reached 2 billion people through the various influencers that posted and encouraged young people to march on that day. Sports is another area that's of real passion to me. People ask me all the time how I connected, for example, with Dikembe Mutombo, who's the global ambassador to the NBA, was a magnificent athlete in his day, Hall of Famer. But even more importantly, he's a tremendous humanitarian who really sunk all of his life savings into building a hospital in the Congo in the name of his mom. And he built an educational center in the name of his dad. And working at the intersection of sports and doing good, I think, is another great way to achieve togetherness and peace and to help people, as Nelson Mandela once said. I guess in closing, and happy to elaborate on any of these things I briefly touched on, as I didn't want to be too long-winded in my remarks, but I'd be happy to elaborate on the opportunities and the openings and how I got into a lot of these opportunities through recognizing the fact that the universe was calling me to walk through a lot of these various doors. I'd conclude by saying that the most important bucket of activity that I'm involved in is being a husband and a father that far exceeds any of my other activities, and that's always my #1 priority and passion and love. So thank you all for having me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of the things I touched on throughout my remarks.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask the first question if I may, but in the meantime, I'd like to remind everyone, if you do have a question, I see them rolling in, but please feel free to send them to me directly using the drop-down box in the chat function. Jay, could you tell us, if you had to choose one or two, I'd say, skills or lessons that you learned in law school, how would you say law school has helped bring you to where you are in your life, in your career?
That's a great question. I've actually I was meaning to talk about how valuable the lessons I learned in law school have been, and how my law school experience really shaped who I am today. First of all, as I've mentioned, I was so grateful to have met a lifelong friend in Professor Kotler because of law school, and to be currently having the honor of being the chair of his board is a really significant aspect of what I do in my life. But the other thing I would say is each of these activities involve legal skills. So even in the talent strategy space, negotiating complicated employment contracts, I was able to have a leg up given my legal training. We're constantly bringing people from abroad or cross-border from the United States to come in as leaders of businesses. You know, obviously I'm not an employment law expert, but having the grounding in law has been invaluable for me. I'm invested in a lot of these businesses that I mentioned, these emerging tech, emerging growth businesses, and we're constantly negotiating contracts and things of that nature. And the fact that I have the legal grounding has been super important to me. And it also informed and influenced the advocacy of work that I do when it comes to advocating for women's rights and women in business. It's another philanthropic project that Professor Kotler mentioned, but that I didn't dive into too much. In 2006, I had this thought to explore the percentage of women at top levels of corporate Canada. So I decided to look at the 100 top largest publicly traded companies in Canada and measure the percentage of women, because as most of you know, public companies have to disclose the compensation of their CEO, their CFO, and at least the next three highest or most senior executives amongst their ranks. And I determined in 2006 that the percent, I figured the numbers would be low, but I didn't realize they'd be that low. In 2006, I determined that the percentage of women in top jobs is 4.6%. And I determined from that moment on to work on this project on an annual basis to put a mirror to corporate Canada so that they can understand the ironclad data in terms of where they're at from the point of view of inclusion and diversity. The good news is the numbers have doubled if you fast forward to today. The bad news is that we're still under 10%.
Okay, we're going to start calling on. Oh, our first question goes to, I believe, your old law school colleague, Alan Mendelson.
No,
you know how to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
Well, he's the number one techie too, Alan.
I should correct. Jay and I were not law school. We're not law school colleagues.
We were YCC. We were YCC campers together. Exactly. We go way back. Way further back.
Before that, you know, Jay, something struck me when you talked about how entrepreneurship was always something of interest to you, and you always felt that you were entrepreneurial. You know, the phrase entrepreneurial is something you never hear in law school, and law school never even discusses for the most part, sort of business aspects of what lawyers should be doing in their future careers. You've got a captive audience of a couple of law school deans in front of you. Do you think that students in law school should be given some sort of training in business or entrepreneurship that they may not be getting right now?
I think that's a great question. I mentioned that entrepreneurship is something that's like second nature to me. It's kind of in my blood. I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs. My father was an electrical contractor, and all I ever heard, for better or for worse, at the kitchen table was business. But I do think that when I was in law school, I seem to remember that there were one, maybe two opportunities to take an elective. And I don't remember how strict the guidelines were in terms of how related to the law faculty these electives needed to be. I remember actually taking philosophy courses, going back to the philosophy department. But I think that the opportunity to learn entrepreneurship is an important one. I don't think universities in general do a very good job in teaching entrepreneurship. In law school, I remember, of course, there were a number of corporate law courses, but that's very, very different from entrepreneurship. I don't really know the answer, to be honest with you, Alan, but I think it's a great question, and it's a great thing to possibly consider. I would extend an offer to the deans on this call to, if they ever want to try and carve out a curriculum or a piece of a curriculum that would include entrepreneurship, I'd be more than pleased to come speak to your students and participate. It's a very good question, Alan. I'm not sure I know the answer to it, but it's very different, as you know, from the study of corporate law.
Thank you, Alan. Our next question is coming from Aaron Lesser.
Hi, Jay.
Hey, Aaron. How are you?
Good. How are you?
By the way, I'm used to pre-COVID times being at the Seder table at my sister's house with Aaron. So
yes,
wonderful seeing all these friends participating in this call.
I know Jay more as Uncle Jay, even though he's not my own uncle. And it's a real pleasure having dinner with you every year. We miss it very much.
Well, we'll hopefully resume soon.
That would be nice.
And now we're having a virtual dinner, so that's good too.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Jay, in light of your career, you have such a diverse career. You've done so many different things. You have your hand in so many different jars. If you had one piece of advice to share with our students tonight, because it is a student dinner, we have a lot of students who are just beginning their career. What piece of advice would that be? The most important piece?
I think that not to get too esoteric, but I do think that the most important thing is to work on your own inner engineering and really try to determine what makes you most fulfilled, what makes you feel most alive, what makes you feel most joyful, and hope that translates into potential avenues in terms of where you go from a career standpoint, but not be overly affected by outside pressures. To get out of the law realm for a moment, I have a daughter as an example who is just an amazing painter. You know, Ali loves to paint, and she's highly artistic. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is when people rib her in front of me and say, she's now studying at OCAD and she's doing fine art and painting. And one of the proudest moments is when people rib her and say, hey, how does your dad feel about you doing something so impractical as painting. And she responds by saying, actually, he's the one who recommended me to do it. And he has my full support because that's my passion. So first of all, it's important to pursue your passion, I think, because that's the way you'll ultimately find your joy and your happiness, which I think is the most important thing. And as I said at the beginning of my remarks, and I have so many stories to back up kind of my thoughts on really having an open mind and being curious and having a sense of joy and exploring the possibilities of our universe and recognizing when the universe is presenting those opportunities and walking through those doors. Because that's kind of how I had a path that was unconventional, but one that I find extremely stimulating and one that I'm so grateful for. And the other thing is not being afraid to seek feedback and constructive criticism, and always trying to find ways to self-improve. And I think if you use that formula, you'll be okay, but not worry about if someone's a little bit so-called ahead of where you are. Like, everyone has their own path and their own time, and there's no two people who are alike. And never worry about comparing with your peers. Just pursue your own path and follow your heart, is what I'd say.
Great advice. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Aaron. The next question is from Neil Hazan.
I thought you were going to pose it for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Super. Jay, I just wanted to know if you ever had any challenges being an entrepreneur and kind of balancing that with being a human rights activist. I mean, for example, you ever forced to temper your positions or, for fear of reprisals, in the international business sphere where there's a lot of governments that tend towards the authoritarian? Just want to know how that plays out for you.
It's a good question. I have a feeling that that from time to time I may have lost business here and there. I can't tell you with certainty. I've had a number of business peers of mine say, like, you may want to shy away from human rights advocacy or being connected to human rights organizations because that might hurt you in certain cases from a business point of view. But my position is, so be it. I am who I am, and issues of human rights, I think, are more important and take priority over any business opportunities in any case. But I can't give you a specific example, but I've probably lost business here and there because of it. And my philosophy is, so be it. It's a great question, though.
Thanks, Neil. We have one question from Stephanie Perlis, who's having technical issues. So I've offered to read it out. So Stephanie's asking, I guess, on behalf of the law students who are present, for those who go to law school and know or think that they know that they don't plan to practice law per se, do you have recommendations as to whether they should pursue the bar or go with their gut and pursue a career outside of the strict practice of law?
I would say if you've gone this far, write one of the bars, right? It's just, I think it's kind of in a way a culmination of all of your hard work. And from a practical standpoint, being a member of a bar, I think, is a good thing. I still, even though I haven't really needed to do this, I've still maintained my, as I told you, Doree, last week, I've still maintained my status as a member of the Ontario Bar, the Law Society of Upper Canada. So I think it's a practical thing to do, unless you're 100% positive that you won't have anything to do with law moving forward. And by the way, anyone who is feeling that way is more than welcome to and knows they want to pursue alternatives to law after law school, is more than welcome to contact me after this call. I'd be more than happy to advise you and see if I could be helpful.
Thank you. That's much appreciated. You might get a lot of calls.
Be my pleasure.
We have, I think, time for one or two more questions. We have a question from Simon Potter. An interesting question. I'm looking.
These are all great questions, by the way.
Simon, able to? Oh, you're muted still. Can we unmute you?
I beg your pardon. I'm not the expert in the technology, but very happy to hear you and talk to you. Such an interesting feuille de route that you've had, and such a lovely way you've found to turn your interests into helpful, productive contributions to people. It raises in my mind a question because, as I'm sure is the case in many people's practices, the paths come by accident. My specialties arrived almost by accident here and there. This lawyer asked me to do that, and suddenly I went down that path, which I hadn't thought of before. And this happened a few times in my career. How is it that we can identify these forks in the road and choose whether they are obstacles or whether they are opportunities? What do you recommend to young lawyers as they come across these accidents? How should they deal with them? How should they incorporate them into their lives or keep them out of their lives? What is it? What kind of an approach would you say is something the young lawyers should have?
That's a great question. My recommendation in general, and I'll tell a little bit of an anecdote, but my recommendation in general is to open the doors that are being presented to you and to walk through them to at least determine whether or not they're for you. I'd mentioned Dikembe Mutombo. The way I met him was, it was NBA All-Star Weekend in Toronto about 5 years ago. And the NBA called me to ask, every NBA All-Star Weekend, there's a political panel. And the NBA called to ask me if I could help them in getting Justin Trudeau to participate in the panel, in the political panel. And so I said I'd try. And his office indicated to me that he wasn't available that weekend, but that Chrystia Freeland was, and that she'd be a great alternative. And so we were able to get Chrystia to come speak, and it was great. And because of that, the NBA in turn gave me tickets to all the events and the parties, and of course the political event as well. And who's sitting next to me is the 7'3" giant, Dikembe Mutombo, and we got to talking, and we immediately hit it off, and we determined me as a guy who's 5'9" and him as a guy who's 7'3" have much more in common than just our towering height. And we exchanged cards, and we agreed to stay in touch. And a few weeks passed, and I'm sitting in my office on a Wednesday night. The phone rings, and it's Dikembe in that distinctive voice. Jay, it's Mutombo. I'm going to be in New York tomorrow. I understand that's pretty close to Toronto. Why don't you meet me for dinner? So I had a decision to make. So here was an opportunity, right, to develop a relationship. And with a person like Dikembe, who has so much demands on his time, and so many people asking him for things, I felt that if I didn't take that window of opportunity and fly to New York to have dinner with him, it would be lost, and I'd never have a relationship with him. So the safe bet would have been to let him know that I'm not available, that I'm booked, which I was fully booked. But instead, I decided to clear my deck and meet him for dinner in Manhattan, and we established an even deeper relationship, which continues to this day, where I'm helping him with his philanthropic activities. I'm bringing him into my tech opportunities where he's incredibly valuable. So that's just one example of where you have a little crack in the window where you could sort of get through it and see where it'll take you. And it's not always the most practical thing. But I've found, and I have countless stories like that. The Winston House story is another one which I haven't told, where if you open those doors, there's no telling what kind of adventure that'll lead you on, and that's the way I've lived my life, and that's the way I recommend people assess opportunities. It's worked out really well for me.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I think we're going to have one more question before we close up, from Amanda Beinman.
That's my niece, Amanda. That's my sister's daughter.
Yes.
Hi, so Amanda. How are you?
I'm great. I apologize the camera's not on. The baby is teething and crying on me as we speak. But
I'm so happy to hear your voice.
I wanted to ask a question because it's something that you helped me with, and I think I helped you with as a child. Relying on family. When Jay was applying to law school as a 4-year-old, I helped lick envelopes and put stamps on as applications went back in the day. But maybe you can elaborate.
I can interrupt you for one moment, Amanda, which is something Amanda won't share. And I don't know if she remembers this, but you were licking so many of these envelopes that eventually your tongue started to bleed.
How things have changed with the internet.
Yeah, and I'll never forget that.
But what I think would be beneficial for the students listening is explain how the importance of family and your network can help law students, not just with their studies, but with their career paths and going on, and how you leaned onto family and your close friends to get where you are today.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely huge. And I mean, Amanda's support over the years, and my sister's support, and my brother, and my parents, like, I was just so blessed to be surrounded my entire life with so much love and so much support and so much positivity. It just continues now in terms of my own immediate family. My wife, Renee, could not be more supportive, could not be a better partner, like just unconditionally supporting me in all of my crazy adventures, and my kids too. And as I mentioned earlier, family for me is number one above everything. And I think with that as my anchor, I always feel like there's no challenge that is too difficult, because I have so much love and support around me.
Thank you,
Jay.
Thank you.
And I think it's a testament, Jay, to the fact that there seems to be a lot of people who are here to see your face and hear what you have to say from many years back. And I think on that note, as we near the end of our evening, I'm going to call on our past president, Greg Azencott, who, before I knew that you were aware he was going to be
yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea Gregory was going to be here, but I'm so happy to see him. And
so we thought it would be apropos to ask Greg, our past president, to please say a few words and thank you for joining us tonight.
So, like everybody else here, I found out that you were speaking when I got the notice from everybody else. So much for being a locked in past president, which I thought I was, but I guess I missed that. And so when I saw that notice pass, I'm like, call up Doree, and I'm like, you're getting Rosie to speak? So I'm like,
that's my nickname for those who haven't gathered.
So for those, so Jay and I go back to, with Larry, pretty much back to kindergarten, and even before that. And not only that, but I was I lived pretty much in Jay's house for my youth and my adolescence for a long time, many hours, to the point where his mom Rose and his dad Meyer used to show me the door, like, don't you have a home? I was the,
my parents loved you, Greg.
I was the rambunctious friend we needed to, whenever we needed something done and we wanted to get something accomplished, Jay was there. I'll never forget that we were looking to have a clubhouse, and sure enough, Jay cleaned out his dad's shed in the backyard, and that shed became our clubhouse for many years. And why am I saying this is because it was from a young age that my friend Jay was driven and did things that, we didn't even think of. The one thing that I thought of, and I don't know if Jay even remembers this, is Jay had a girlfriend in high school prior to Renee, who is also, by the way, his high school sweetheart. And we're close to Valentine's Day, and to woo her on Valentine's Day, Jay, who played chopsticks on the piano, learned how to play, and if my memory serves me, Stairway to Heaven, in order to woo her on Valentine's Day. And I was floored. So I know that Jay talks to you about being humble, and he is, and he hasn't told you 1/100th of the stuff that he's into, whether it's NFTs now, or hobnobbing with the rich and famous, whether it's Matumbo or, presidential candidates such as Yang, or the Prime Minister Trudeau, or a bunch of people like the late Ken Cragen of We Are the World fame, and like I said, Andrew Yang, who was the presidential candidate in the United States. So Jay has hobnobbed with everybody, but mostly I know that he's proud of, because I follow his life on Instagram, is that he spends a tremendous amount of time not only on his nonprofits and human rights, and that he's Erwin Kotler's Raoul Wallenberg Foundation chairman, but a lot of youth, a lot of young companies, a lot of startups, a lot of tech companies, and not just tech companies, but all sorts of companies. So I was especially happy to see that my friend Rosie was going to speak to the youth, because Jay, quite frankly, is the guy who, actually, I'm going to say second to Erwin, who doesn't sleep ever, and who, by the way, it's like, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning for Erwin right now in Jerusalem, but is the guy with the most energy that I've ever seen. So I, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of everybody at Lord Reading, I want to thank you for coming out, and I want to thank you for speaking to us. And I'm really hoping that one day we are able to have you at Lord Reading in person sometime very soon.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg.
You again.
I always say that, and I always tell Greg this, that he has a heart of gold. And when my mom, near the end of her life, was having complications with a landlord-tenant issue and whatnot, Greg was there for her, bringing papers to her home and doing anything he could for her. And he refused to have her pay a dime. And I really appreciate that, Greg, and your friendship means the world to me.
And it's Mildred here. Since you recognize me, I would like to say your mother and father would be very, very proud. And even your grandparents, whom I remember very well. I spent many years in Jay's house the same way that you, Greg, spent in, I spent many years in his mother's house the same way that you spent many years in Jay's house. They had to show me the door too. So how do I get in touch with you?
Maybe Doree can give you my phone number with pleasure. I'd love to come visit. And
we'll connect you.
It's just so, I'm just so happy to see you, Mildred. Like, it's been way, way, way too long. And my mom loved you so much.
Well, we were very, very close from the time I was 7 years old and always throughout our lives.
Amazing.
We will get you connected, but at the end of the evening, I promise.
Thank you. In case Greg, you don't know who I am,
we will find a way to get in touch. I promise that. To end our evening, and thank you, Greg, for your words. I want to thank everyone again for attending. Jay, although you're not with us in person, that means that you're not here to accept our token traditional Lord Reading pen, which will be mailed to you or messenger to you wherever you are. And we hope that you use it to write and inspire and continue to do good, as you've clearly been doing. I'd want to thank the members of the board and our executive who've been incredible in planning this evening. Aux étudiants, retournez nous voir, restez en contact avec nous et félicitations encore une fois aux gagnantes. Comme vous le savez, Lord Reading est une société entièrement dirigée par des bénévoles et je tiens à remercier tout le monde pour votre dévouement, votre travail. Finalement, Alan Mendelson, Larry Markowitz, and Stephanie Perlis are the brains behind the operation. Without them and their technical support, we would not exist, certainly not on Zoom. And as I'm required to say in this century, please come see us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn, and at lordreading.org, where you can stay in touch. And we hope to see you again in person. But in the meantime, stay safe and thank you. Bonsoir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Merci. Félicitations.
Merci beaucoup. Go to sleep, Erwin.